we're imagining a boss. We've made a plan on how we need to implement him, but now it's time to get into the nitty gritty. So how do we take something like our little boss concept art and animate it? Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. Okay, so in today's video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be covering how to build some of the pixel art. Now, some of the work I did prior to recording, so I'm not going to show you my full process on some of that. But the intent here is to kind of just illuminate the process. We're in the build phase, though, now of this, right? We've got the ideas that we imagined. We put a plan together, and now we're working on building out that plan. And the pixel art is one aspect that can come later in the process. I like to cheat on that rule, and I do it earlier in the process because I'm a creative and I like to draw, and I guess it just helps inspire me as I'm implementing it. Okay, so if you hear someone telling you that you're doing something in the wrong order, they might be kind of right, but to some degree, just do what works for you, and that's what I'm doing here. So we're going to build out a little bit of the Nega Pink Box hero, what he looks like, how his animations work, and then I'm going to spend a little bit more time diving into and just showing the full process of creating some of the effects that we're going to use for the Nega Pink Box hero. They're pretty simple, but it'll kind of show you how I animate, and it'll show you some techniques for getting good looping animations. Okay, so we'll be doing that as well. It will have like an explosion and a wave that emits from both directions from the hero. All right, so in the concepting phase of this character, this is kind of where I arrived, and I really, really like this character here. And I kind of went through and I refined it and wanted to bring just a few things in a little bit tighter and borrow some of the shading a little bit better for my player. And so I ended up with this here. And you'll notice I adjusted the colors as well. And actually, you know, as of recording of this, I've kind of gone back. I moved to like a straight pink that matched the pink on the original placeholder pink box in Godot. But this pink that I picked over here that's a little bit more reddish just feels better to me. And so when I look at these side by side, I definitely prefer this one here. So I've gone ahead and moved over to use this coloring, but with this design. So the shoulders have a better square, I think. And I mean, it's basically the same, just a few adjustments to the artwork. Now, because this enemy is based off the hero artwork, I'm not going to show you my full creation process here because it's not going to be that educational because I'm doing a lot of paint over with the exception of the hair. So you can see I've animated the hair in the idle pose. And likewise, I've gone and I've taken the run animation and I've redrawn it. And the things that, of course, change the most, it's mostly colors, shoulders, and hair. Everything else is pretty much as is. I've got the jump cycle in here so that this guy can jump. He's got a dash pose. Take damage. I'm not sure I'm going to use the take damage, but it was there, so I just went ahead and recolored it. I've got an attack, and I'll show you I did animate this. I've got a little bit of that process here. Ground slam, much more involved than the players, and then a death animation. Okay, so you can see I've kind of done that. Now, what I want to do is I want to kind of show you a little bit of my process for the attack and the ground slam and talk about that. And then we're also going to be building out some of the effects that this character is going to need. So in particular, when he does this ground slam move, we need some sort of energy and shockwave kind of animations that we can have emit from the enemy so that they, you know, fly across the screen. Now, one thing that I found important to do as I worked on animating this enemy was improving the attack animation. So on the player, we built the attack animation so that it feels instant, meaning as soon as you press the button, you're getting that hit register. And so that meant that we didn't really want to show much, if any, wind up to the attack, okay? Because that time for that wind up can feel or can detract from the responsiveness feeling. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it. There's lots of games that do have full animations for attacks. You know, I'm thinking of Souls-like genres. But for this game, I didn't want it. Now, for enemies, though, that's a little bit different because we don't want the enemies to have that instant attack. It's better for the player to be able to recognize that the enemy is about to swing his sword, so they have a split second maybe to try and jump or dodge out of the way. Okay, and so with this enemy, that's what we're going to do. And so my approach is going to be quite simple, to where I'm going to add a new frame where the enemy is holding the sword up, so he's, you know, winding up or beginning his attack. Okay, this is the portion that telegraphs what he's going to do. And then I'll duplicate a frame in between or two, and then we'll just add some extra details to animate what those look like. Now, this is an approach that you'll see me use again with the ground slam, but essentially what we're doing is we're drawing the key frames, the most important frames, like the start and the end of the pose first, and then we can add the frames in between, the in-between frames after we get those keyframes settled. And so here you can see I'm making adjustments. We'll just drag some of the stuff around and then redraw portions as needed to get that swing animation that we want. And now that we've got the swing animation more or less looking good, I'm going to add some smear effect to the sword. This is going to add to the feel of motion that we get from this. So even though we've got fewer frames, it's going to help kind of flesh it out and connect the two poses and make it feel a little bit more cohesive. And we've got a complete attack animation, and we can freeze on that first frame as long as we need to give the player a chance to respond. Now, this next bit of animating is a little bit more in depth. This is the ground slam, and you can see here I kind of missed recording some parts of this, but we're going to start where I've got some frames of the enemy kind of in this bald, crouched up state where he would be hovering in the air, and I've just got a few frames in between, and I need to smooth it out. But the approach I'm going to take here is very similar. I'm going to use the concept of keyframes. We're going to take the important parts of the pose. I'm going to flesh those out first, and then we'll draw the in-between frames later. Now, one of the reasons we do this is because those keyframes convey the important information, and the in-betweens, even if they're a little bit sloppy, will still work regardless, and you'll be able to see where you're going from point A to point B, and it's going to make it a lot easier to draw those in-between frames, right? Because otherwise, if you just try and animate one frame at a time and arrive at the destination that you want, you might not quite get there, and then you got to go redraw all of them. But in this case, again, we're drawing those important frames first so that they act as the key. That's why they're called the keyframe. And so one of these keyframes then is just about complete, where we've got the enemy extended. This is what he'll look like as he's flying down from his kind of hovered position towards the ground that he's going to slam. And you'll notice I kind of stretched out the character, his hair, to kind of exaggerate that vertical movement. And I'm going to animate the kind of flaming boxy hair a little bit. And so you can see I've got a few frames of this that are just duplicated, just so I can animate the hair. And then we'll add some effects, the smearing that I did with the sword. Same kind of thing, same kind of concept on the shoulder pads. So we can just play these 3 frames on loop as the enemy's flying down towards the ground, and that'll give a sense of motion in addition to the movement of the sprite. Okay, so now we need to go back and look at these frames I have where the enemy is kind of balling up into the form where he's going to charge. Because right now it looks pretty janky. It's not conveying a very good sense of movement, but you can see that we're going from a position where he's facing left or right to one where he's facing straight forward, at the viewer, at the camera. And so I just want to add some in-between frames to this. I'm going to go ahead and create those, and then we'll slowly massage the pixels on each of these to get it to look right. And so I'm going to do things like take some portions of the shoulder pads like this square, squish it down to get that effect of it turning, the perspective turning away from the viewer. And it doesn't look perfect yet, but it's coming along. And part of the problem is the rest of the body's not moving with it. So what we can do is we can work on moving some of the torso next. So I'm going to isolate just that section, turn off the shoulder layers, which is one reason why I like to keep a lot of layers. And then I can go ahead and I can go through here. I can animate the head, the body, the legs, whatever I need to, without the shoulders being in the way since they're so big and bulky and kind of distract. So here you can see I've animated the head, the body, the chest, not quite there yet. And getting this chest to rotate is taking a little bit of time, but It's just simple work of just kind of one pixel at a time checking. It's really important to keep that preview playing, or really helpful, I should say. Maybe not important, but very helpful, so that as you make changes, you can kind of see in real time how they're affecting the playback of the animation. And along with the chest, we need to animate the legs a little bit more. And so that's going to require some work as well. So we can do the belt and the loincloth section and then the legs. And animating the legs, you know, you can see I'm just using the onion skin settings here so I can see the before and the after. And I'm just going to draw more or less 50% in between both of those frames. And that's where that keyframe becomes really useful, right? Now, we also need to do the arm that was in the back behind, because it needs to come forward to be symmetrical with the arm on the other side. And I'm going to do some copy pasting and moving around just to get things looking kind of how I want them to, and using the layers to help me put things in front or behind others. And just with that simple copy and paste of the back arm, you can see that it gives a pretty good animation. It's already looking a lot more like I wanted it to at this point, but there's maybe a few details that we could still come through and iron out. In particular, as he explodes down towards the ground, I think I just want some extra keyframes in here to smooth out this part of the animation. And in addition to that, I need to animate the hair along this, because I've been animating the body, but kind of duplicating the hair, and it just starting to look a little bit funky. So let's go ahead and fix the hair real quick. And I'm just going back and forth between frames, just checking to make sure that I like how the animation looks. And if there's anything that looks off, I can adjust it. And in fact, I've decided at some point that the shoulders and the arms need to come in a little bit further. They were a little bit too wide. And so I'm going to make that adjustment to one side, and then I'll copy it to the other. But I'm also going to be animating those hands so that they go to a more scrunched up position than they were before, and just really add to the feel of this animation. There we go. So now that the hands kind of squeeze in a little bit. And I'm going to work on these legs a little bit more as well. I want those to squeeze in a little bit more. And I just need to smooth out that bit of the animation to make it look more pleasing. And so lastly, it's just smoothing out that burst, that explosion, that feeling from when he goes from scrunched to shooting down. I just need to add at least one frame in there, I think, to make it feel a little bit better. And you can see that it's pretty easy, because if I can just compare one frame to another, you can even copy like I'm doing. You just copy one of those frames that you're, you know, one of the A or B that you're going from, or to, whichever one's maybe closer to what the next in between should look like. And then you just make some little tweaks, drag things around, add or remove some pixels as needed. And the work can go pretty quick once you've got good keyframes in place. And there we have it. There's the ground slam animation for my enemy. It's going to allow us to have the enemy kind of fly from the ground up to some spot in the screen, and then he can maintain that charging pose for a moment before he flies down, slams into the ground, and sends shockwaves across the arena. All right, next, what I want to do is I want to take this boss fight and I want to look at the effects that we're going to need. And this is the part where we'll really get into a little bit more in depth. And I'm going to go ahead and use this as a reference here. I'm going to start just looking at this sprite property. So this is 80 pixels by 80 pixels, this canvas. And I want my effect to be bigger than this probably. And so I'm thinking of the ground slam and these waves that are going to fly out. So let's go ahead and make a new document. And I'm going to go with 128 by 128. I'm trying to stick to a power of 2 here. Okay, so this is a pretty large canvas, but not too much larger here. Let me grab, in fact, a copy of this. I'm going to do Control A and then Shift Control C. That's going to copy the merged files there, or not files, but layers. Okay, so there's a reference. This is what our boss and our player hero are the same size as this. So that means that if we were to use this, let's make a new layer. If we were to just kind of draw like a wave and make it the height of this document, then, you know, that's how tall it would be, which I think is pretty good, actually. I think that's a good height. You'll notice I'm keeping a 1 pixel distance from the edge. That's intentional. I'm just trying to prevent issues where you see pixels wrapping when you don't want them to, and it causes weird little janky effects sometimes to pop up. And it's an issue that I think is best solved this way. And I've seen it actually quite a bit in our Metroidvania Forge series, and I haven't really called it out much, but it's definitely there from time to time. So, okay, so this is what we're doing here. We've got this. If I were to take this and center it, then that's kind of where, you know, we could draw this effect that's going to wave out. But we probably also need something for when the enemy hits the ground. So let's go ahead and get this ground slam, one of these tags right here where he's about to hit the ground. And let's just make Alt B to make a new blank layer. And let's paste him here. Okay, yeah, I've got that centered. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and copy that, deselect, copy that frame and paste it here. Okay, so, wait, did I get that centered right? Did I drag it? I must have assumed I had it right. Okay, there we go. That looks better. Now this one is not centered because I moved it. Okay. This is going to be annoying and janky while we're getting things sorted out here, but I'm just being finicky. Let's center that. I think what we're going to want to do with this is I kind of want to maintain this feeling of, you know, I'm playing off of the box, right? I'm playing off of the pink box hero concept. And so this enemies, I've just kind of been subconsciously adding the boxes, whether that's in the armor or in the hair, you know, the flaming box hair, whatever that is. Flaming box, I don't know. It's not flaming. So I kind of retain that, but I also want to play with some other things, like maybe we have some other forms that kind of are more circular, but then they morph into these squares and rectangles. And furthermore, I think when he hits the ground, I could have some nice animations for the enemy, so he's crouching and whatnot, but I'm going to take a lazy route on this one, and since we're going to be animating effects when he hits the ground, I think what we'll do is we'll make it so that the explosion covers him temporarily, so by the time the explosion happens, he'll just be standing there, and I think I'm okay with that. Now, if I was polishing this, maybe I would change my mind, and I want more animations, so we could come back here and add, you know, after the ground slam, we could have hit ground animations and standing back up and stuff like that. I'm just not going to do that for right now. But let's go ahead and do this. So I think actually this streak, this line is kind of cool. So when he first hits the ground, and in fact, it should be in front of him. I'm going to go ahead and drag this reference layer back. I'm going to call it ref. So I know it's the enemy, or lock it so I don't accidentally draw on it or move it. Okay, so this frame when he hits the ground is going to need to be covering him up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on this mirroring so that I don't have to worry about drawing on both sides. And I'm going to draw kind of some, I don't know, actually don't know what I'm doing, some shapes here. And what's nice about a sprite is some of these tools are really designed for this kind of work, right? Like this mirror mode that I've got going. Oops, I need to turn contiguous on my fill. Hey, Phil, how's it going? I always say Phil, weird. Phil. Okay. I'm going to stop this animation playback right now. It's kind of driving me nuts. So I think actually that kind of is neat. He's hitting the ground, and so there's going to be some form of energy, but I'm going to go ahead and just make the first frame kind of like this, except I probably don't need this to be a complete box. So I'm going to grab my eraser and just get rid of some of this stuff. Let's redo that. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay, so when he hits the ground, we're going to have something like this appear. And we might need to actually add a frame before it. So I'm going to go Alt-N, Alt-N. So we've got 2. I'm going to select these and make a new tag. And actually, I'm going to move these. I'm going to take this frame 0 and I'm going to move it to the end. Okay, because hitting the ground will come first. It will spawn an explosion and the waves will emit from this. So this is the first one. So let's go ahead and take this, hit ground, and I'm gonna just trim it down a little bit so the first frame is a little bit smaller. Okay. So now it's going to go boom and kind of explode out from there. So then this third frame should be quite a bit larger. And what we can do is start adding in some things. And I'm keeping the mirror mode on so I can mirror this, make it go quicker. But that some of this stuff, like this line here, just needs to shrink down. It needs to come down. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. And then I'm going to do one more. I'm just going to do one more new frame here. And actually, let's make this a blank frame. And I'll go ahead and copy the idle, paste it. Okay, now on this frame, I want to assume the explosion's almost over. And in fact, I'm going to turn off mirroring at this point because I don't want it to be too symmetrical. But we'll have like some boxes kind of scattered out and about and some little ones. Okay, so this might not be the last frame, but this is kind of how the animation's going to play out, right? It's going to go from like this streak to an explosion to the explosion's going to fade out into these square-like particles. Now, you could use a particle emitter to do some of this work as well, but I'm going to just do pretty much all of it here in a sprite. Okay, so we've got 4 frames for this animation for hitting the ground. And now what we need to do is maybe come in here and let's go ahead and on this frame, I'm going to make it less symmetrical now. Okay. Because I don't need it to be perfectly symmetrical. That was just a way to get started. Okay, so we've got kind of an explosion happening. And I'm just trying to keep it chunky so it kind of fits. So this is not very smooth, right? So what we need to do is we need some in-betweens. Really, these first couple frames are fine. They're going to play back so quick, at least 0 and 1. That I don't need much of an in-between between those. Maybe between 1 and 2, we need an in-between. And then between 2 and 3, we'll need multiple. And probably even a frame or 2 after this one. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Alt-N while I've got this frame selected. That'll create a copy. And now because I've got the onion skinning on, you need to turn that on if you don't have it. And a little tidbit, you can control how far forward or back the onion skin shows by dragging these. You can see these little corners that show what the onion skin is showing, right? So if I wanted to see 2 frames in the future and 2 frames in the past, I could. Okay. I don't really want that, but just a fun little tidbit there. So yeah, an explosion tends to be, high energy at first. You're going to have a really violent explosion. An explosion is a really violent event, and so the keyframes are going to be really fast at first, and then things can slow down as it dissipates, as that energy dissipates. Okay, so we kind of are going to use more and more frames as we go through this animation, but just from here to here, let's go ahead and let's take this new frame that we've created and we'll do the in-betweens. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to start with the eraser on this because this needs to change a little bit. Okay. So we can see this top bit is kind of coming down. And then here we'll just get our brush and we can start painting in some shapes that kind of fill it out. And you could use mirroring at this part. I'm not. I'm just going to go with it because, ultimately I ended up making these a little bit different anyways. So now one thing I'm not dealing with is this base area. I probably should, but we'll handle that as we start to dissipate it, the effect. Okay. And there's no exact science to this, really. You know, I'm just kind of having fun with it at this point. And this is going to be kind of a weird, I mean, this is an atypical kind of explosion, right? Usually we've got maybe some bursts, but then really circular. So this is going to look a little bit different. At this point, I can hit play on this if I want. You can see how that's playing out. And we might even want to increase the speed, the playback speed of this. And that might drive my eyes nuts while I'm working. So I'm going to just stop that momentarily. But there we've got some in-betweens. So now we go from 3 to 4, right? So this concept of drawing the keyframes, that's a lot to in between. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a new blank frame here. And just copy and paste the little bad guy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fake my own in-betweens here real quick. I'm going to say, yeah, like these squares are here, so they must come from somewhere. And like, I don't know, we're going to have, actually, I don't like that. Hold on. I need to think back a little bit more general. So I need this shape to kind of disappear. So this part at the base probably starts to go away. And this is going to become pretty small at some point. In fact, I'm even going to take more off of that. Okay, but as this gets smaller, we need kind of this effect of particles emitting from, coming out of this. Okay. Some of them might be bigger chunks. There might be a couple big chunks. And then let's get some smaller stuff. And they might be a little bit more dense as we're close to this center of this explosion effect. Okay. Let's go ahead and just hit play on this. That's looking okay, actually, except that the latter frames are way too fast. We could vary the speed at which they play back. And I'm actually going to turn off the reference layer right now and just to see just these. So from now, what we can do is this is like a new keyframe, right? So we can say from frame 3 to frame 4, maybe we've got, you know, a different kind of frame here. And then from frame 4 to frame 5, I'm just going to add a blank frame to each of these because it's so simple what we're drawing. We don't need anything crazy. All right, so now we got to go from this to that. And so I'm going to turn on, I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to draw out a shape that just kind of generally fits maybe what I'm going for. Something that's neither here nor there, right? It straddles the two shapes. That's a really weird shape. It might actually work though. Yeah, I think it'll work pretty good, especially once I come in here with some big chunky squares and add these in. So by this frame, we've got some stuff flying out. Okay, so here we can do the same thing. Oops. Maybe we've got a chunk there, a chunk here. Bump. Okay. So these big chunks become these smaller chunks later on. Is where I'm going with that, right? And I don't like this right there. Okay. That's kind of cool. I'm okay with that. So let's go ahead and do the same thing from here to there. So this one's going to be primarily like this block in the center is going to be almost gone at this point. So I'm going to just go just like a block and then maybe some blocks that are going to turn into these other ones that are emitting. And actually sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what's before or after in this case. So I'm going to just drag boink. So I'm only seeing the current and the next frame with my onion skinning. It's going to help me a little bit. Make sure that I'm not drawing too many blocks because I think I actually might have already drawn more than I needed in a couple spots. Okay. Just trying to make predicting shapes that line up with all these other ones. Now I'm going to go ahead and create another blank frame here. And I'm going to turn my onion skinning back to show just the previous frame so that I can see what I had. And these are going to become small dots. Kind of keep their momentum. If it's moving out this way, then, you know, it's going to actually shouldn't have this one like that. It should be, these small ones should be close. Like the energy of the explosion is dissipating, and so the particles are moving more slowly. They should have a little bit less momentum behind their movement. Okay, that's kind of fun. Now, we could refine this a lot, and maybe the only thing we might want to do would be to add more color to it, but I'm not even going to do that right now. I'm just going to keep this as is. Okay, so we've got this wave. So when the enemy smashes into the ground, as soon as he hits, we're going to play this animation. It's going to cover him up. By the time the animation's done, we'll be able to see him if we add him into these frames. Oops, except wrong. I picked the wrong frame to copy. I want the idle. Okay. So he'll be standing there, boom, and ready for his next, whatever, action. So that's the basic explosion. Now we're going to take this concept and apply it to these waves that might be flying out from, you know, either side of him. Now for these waves, I'm going to have them just kind of flying. I'm not going to have them shrink or anything as they go. They're just probably going to travel even off the screen, I guess, is what I'm thinking. So I'm not going to worry about them colliding with anything except the player, and the player will simply take damage if they hit him, and then they'll just keep going. So we'll come here. I can turn off this reference. So the idea with the wave is that it's going to have to animate. It's going to have to work directionally, right? So what I mean is it's going to have particles flying out from it, and then we'll be able to flip that to make it, you know, mirror that, flip it horizontally in the engine to make the other direction, the other wave. So I want probably my bar to be over here, and I don't even know if we need it this tall necessarily, but that's kind of what we're going to start with. And I'm going to keep the edge hard on one side, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of assume that it's kind of emitting some of these blocky shapes. They're going to be kind of jiggling maybe on the edge. Okay. Now this is going to become a new tag. I'll call it the wave. I don't know what it should be. I'm going to make a new blank frame, turn this reference off, and let's stop the animation for a bit. Now this one, because it's just going to continuously travel, we don't need keyframes that are super special. Really what we're going to be doing is just kind of animating it. So I'm going to make a second version of this that's basically the same. So I'll just get another brush. Okay. Except we need these blocks to be maybe in a slightly different position to make it look like it's alive and moving. So like maybe some of these sections that were popping out are now going to be shorter. I'm going to make this one kind of really long. And then we can even maybe disconnect some of them, right? Like this. So if we were to play this back, it's going to look kind of janky right now, I think. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this frame and I'm going to make a new blank. We just need it to loop because it needs to be a looping animation, I guess, is what I didn't say. Copy, paste. Okay. So if this goes to this, then back to this, then what does that look like, right? And I'm going to go ahead and make a new, let's go ahead and make a new blank keyframe right here. And our onion skinning needs to be probably on both so we can see how it's changing, right? Let's go ahead and get this initial shape drawn out, this initial line, because that doesn't really change. Okay, so we're going from here to this blob being kind of down below. So you can see there's like a little bit of difference here. I'm not sure if I made the best decision with how I'm doing all of this, but then we're going to have some fun with this too eventually. So it's a little bit hard to see because this pink is so vibrant, but we've got this shape here that becomes this shape there. So I need it to be somewhere in the middle, right? That's really what we're going for, is like, what's the in the middle? What's the in the middle shape? The in between, which is where the term tweening comes from, by the way. This in between. It's an old animation term. Okay. So you can see like this shape is emerging from the block. So we can kind of have it coming out just a little bit, maybe. Same here. Now, if I were to play this back, it's starting to do something that makes sense, but we've got a pretty big leap from here back to the original. So let's do one more blank frame. Draw this out. And I'm going to just take my onion skin and just show, this is so tough. I guess I got to see both of them. I really do. Before, after. So this block needs to melt away. These ones are probably detaching. I'm going to look at the after more. So I need stuff that's like pre the after. So it's going to be like a chunk down here. Right? We've got a block that's going to be merging here. Oops, here. Maybe right here. Okay. Yeah, this one is starting to emerge now as well. I'm just toggling back and forth just to train my eye on what's happening here. I think one thing that's interesting is we've got this big chunk that needs to be broken away here. So from that to that, we need to, right? I mean, and we've got a little chunk. We'll handle that momentarily. We're talking about this big one right here to this small one right here. And this needs to be kind of protruding a little bit more. Okay, so you can see we've got a little bit of a looping effect going on here. So it's a little bit rough, I guess, probably because this last frame is frame 9, so it's kind of hiccuping. Let's delete frame 13 and it's going to be smoother. Okay, so this might be mostly okay. It's kind of repeating. We need to just add a little bit more to it. 4 frames isn't a lot, but if we were to say take each of these things and play them out. So let's take this bar right here. Okay, this section right here. You can see it goes out, out, and then it just kind of disappears. So what we could do then is I'm on frame 12, and then we'll go back to frame 9. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to decrease my brush size, and I'm going to go like that. So now this piece breaks away on frame 12. And then that means on frame 9, it needs to be, and you can see our onion skinning is still working. It needs to be a little blob out here. And then on frame 10, it's a little blob out here. And then maybe even by frame 11, it's like a tiny little dot. You see how that's trailing off? Now this is interesting because we're taking this piece that's growing is also this piece that's blobbing off, right? It's hard to see that, but because we're only getting 4 frames, but technically this thing is animated for 8 frames because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 out to here, and then from frame 9 it just keeps going. So that was 5, 6, 7, and frame 8 it's gone. And if we wanted to, we could put a small dot. Okay, so we're going to do that here. We're going to take everything that has a life cycle and we're going to extend it through that same way. Let's take this one down here next, okay? Because by the first frame now, it's kind of broken off. And, did we kind of abandon it? We sure did. This piece on 9, then on 11 is out here, and we kind of don't carry that through. So let's go like this. Add on frame 10, let's add a little bit. Okay, there we go. So now on frame 12, this one can be, maybe what we do is we split it into 2. It'd be kind of fun, right? That means when we go back to frame 9, now, even though it's right here, we can also continue the animation out. And I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go down, because they'll split. Maybe they kind of go in opposing directions. Like that. Till eventually it's just a little pixel. Okay, see how that's looping? Now we need to do the same things with this bit of stuff here. And this is just going to become this weird, you know, square energy thing that's just constantly looping and pushing. And we're just going to have it animate till it goes off screen. Then we can destroy him at that point. Okay, let's just go through this. You notice how I kind of made this one bobble a little bit? That kind of adds some fun energy. I kind of like that. It might even emphasize that on some of these other little blocks. Make them a little bit more erratic and less predictable looking. Now, one thing that I'm seeing is that a lot of these are terminating at about... What am I doing? I'm hitting the wrong button. A lot of these are terminating at about the same time, which leads to a somewhat predictable, right? These dots are all fading out at about the same rate. That's probably okay, but it would be good somewhere to find some that hopefully we can fade out sooner, or, you know, give them a different kind of a life cycle. So I'm going to target this one next. It's kind of fading out slowly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that going. I'm going to make it kind of have a different kind of a life cycle. Okay. So it's going to slowly float out so that it's not ending at the same time as all the others, because they all tend to disappear around frame 12. Okay. So we can, and what's funny about this is we can keep looping these for, I mean, almost indefinitely. Like we could make these things animate all the way across the whole canvas if we wanted to, right? And I'm not going to quite do that, but you know. Okay, so now these ones are a little bit different. Their timing's a little bit different. We need to introduce more of that, okay? And, I mean, we could really go crazy with this if we wanted to, but I don't know. What I'm going to do is right here where this chunk gets a lot smaller here, I'm going to maybe break off. I'm going to break off a chunk of it. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going with the same kind of idea. Okay, a little bit of crazy junk going on right there. I might need to make that a little bit smoother. I don't know. But ultimately, I think it's getting what I want. Let's just add a little bit more up top, because up here it's kind of lame. We don't have anything happening. Okay. And even maybe what we do is we take some chunks. I'm using the eraser here. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, actually, other than messing around with it. I think that's fun. Make it not. Yeah, that's fine. A little wobbly. Now we can make some more stuff fly out from it. Okay. We probably just need a little bit of action right in here. Like it looks like right here we need something to break off right about now. In fact, you know, maybe we add a little bit more right here as well. I wish hitting the arrow keys would loop you in within your tag. Maybe there's a way to make it do that. I just don't, and I don't know. So if you know such a feature in a sprite, please comment. What am I doing? Yeah. This one could be moving at a quicker rate. This one that's shooting out right here. It's kind of interesting. I wonder if I need to do a little bit more with it. Yeah, I think right here, that's a pretty big gap. Let's add in some weird junk. Okay, so now we've got more to deal with in here. It's going to make it a little bit more interesting, hopefully. Just still going, just chugging along with these, whatever I'm doing. See, this thing overtakes this small one. That's okay though. Now it's a little bit more interesting at least. Okay, so we could take this and really keep pushing it if we wanted to. I think the only thing I see that I don't like a lot is this bottom part. I kind of want it to maybe maintain a connection to the ground. So I'm just going to redo that a little bit, and then I'll probably call it good. Okay, there we go. That's the wave that flies out from the explosion. Now it's just going to have to spawn and kind of go to the side. And so maybe that's going to look a little janky. It's going to essentially come out of this. So maybe right about here or there, these things spawn. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to look in game. This is one of those things that later on, you know, as we go through this loop, we're going to have to refine this possibly. I don't know, but I'm going to make this available on itch.io so that you guys have it when we get to the next steps. But you're always welcome to make your own. And in fact, that's going to be your obvious homework assignment here, is to work on your own effects that you're going to use for your enemy, whether they be the explosions or a wave like this, or maybe you're just thinking with any other part, maybe his attack, you want to have a different kind of a sword swoosh. I'm going to reuse the one that our player had, but you know, think about what you want to add effect wise to your enemy and go ahead and animate that. I just realized I never saved this, so I'm going to save it real quick. Okay, so it's called Pink Box Effects. And once we're done with this and our boss, we can export these. Now, an important note when we're exporting them, I made this one pretty large. It's 128 by 128 pixels. So we don't want this to be too huge. It would be nice to keep kind of a nice aspect ratio. So 128 is a power of 2. So if we were to take 128 and multiply it by 2 again, we'd get 256. Then we'd get 512, right? Let's take 512 as an example. Let's say 512 divided by 128. So that should be 4. So if we had 4 across, then our texture atlas would be 512 pixels wide. I think we could go even bigger. So maybe 8 of these across, right? So 128 times 8 would give us 1024, also a power of 2 number. So I'm going to come in here when I export this by rows. That's fine. The constraints, I'm going to say fixed number of columns and put 8, right? Is what we determined. So this would give us a texture that's 128 or 1024 pixels wide by 256 tall. Alternatively, we could pick 4. And actually that looks pretty good too. That gives us a 4x4. We've got some empty sections here. So, I mean, I don't know, right? You could kind of decide how you want to do it. 2 does a good job of only giving us 1 empty pixel, which is fine. We could put this as 6, I guess. No, that's not working. What was that? 5? Whatever. Figure something out. I guess it doesn't have to be power of 2, but power of 2 size textures just work better for memory purposes with GPUs. So I just, something that was ingrained in me back in the day when trying to keep things performant was to keep textures at power of 2 resolutions, so, or dimensions. And so you know, take it or leave it. I'm going to go ahead and just leave this at 5, but whatever you choose to export it as is what your setup is going to be like when you get into the game. And so, right, so this is 5 columns, 3 rows. So then when we set this texture up, right, that's how we're going to set it up in Godot. I'm going to go ahead and keep this. If it doesn't say export, it's probably because you have output file unchecked. And so just make sure that this is saving to where you want it to, and then go ahead and export it. I'll do the same thing with my Nega Pinkbox hero. You can see for me, I've got him set up. He's 8 columns, okay? And it uses them up pretty well. There's a little bit of extra space down here because we're only using like 1 frame on this last row. I'm not too worried about texture management like that, okay? Because I think this is a good size. But if you're gonna get nitpicky, you could always fill them up. I always assume I always plan on leaving a little bit extra space because I assume that I'm gonna come back and add a few more frames to an animation. So it's good to have the texture have some empty frames so that you can use them later if needed. And if I had, like, if this were my player and I was anticipating a lot of animations, I might even come in here and add a bunch of empty frames so that when I'm exporting it, it adds all those blank frames extra. Maybe it adds extra rows that are blank because I know that I'm going to come back and fill them. And the benefit to that is that when I make that export in the future, the dimensions of the sprite atlas doesn't change, so I don't have to go reconfigure stuff. I mean, that's kind of small and minor, but it's just something I like to do to kind of be future-proofing my work. But this needs to be exported, and there we go. So we've got 2 sprite sheets, right? We've got our Nega Pinkbox hero sprite sheet for our boss that we can use. We can bring this into Godot, and again, this will be available on itch.io for those of you who want to grab it. And in addition, we've got this our Pinkbox effects, Nega Pinkbox effects that we're going to be using. Looks kind of goofy, but we saw the animations in motion and I think they fit what I want for it, so I'm going to call it a win, and this also will be available. So there we have it. That's the episode today. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing how I work and how I flesh out some of these animations. In the future, I'll be doing more pixel art related videos so that we can dive into that. But for this series, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. I hope you guys did learn something though. As always, if you're new, please subscribe. It helps my channel grow and it lets you know when the next video is coming. And in the next episode, you can look forward to more of this building phase work that we've been doing. Okay, so we're going to be looking at music, and I'm going to talk about some of my processes for that, even though I'm not an expert, and it's something that you may want to hire out. But, you know, for those of you who are interested, I'm going to expose some tools that I use and talk about just how I make a song for this boss. So thanks again for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.